If they discover the secret I've been hiding for 21 years, I'll be the next governess to die.
That dress is far too thin to hide what you're carrying. His coppery brown eyes traveled slowly over her drenched body from head to toe. You should be careful. A night like this invites danger. At that moment, Eve had no idea the handsome stranger standing in front of her was a vampire. But what terrified her even more was something else. What if he could see what she was? The secret she had buried for 28 years. The truth that had kept her away from every man who had ever tried to come close. Eve had rushed out to the village market before the storm got worse, her thin dress clinging to her skin as the cold wind bit through it. She stretched her hand out, expecting him to help her. But he didn't move. He just stood there, watching. Rude and unsettlingly beautiful. Rain dripped from his dark hair, his sharp jaw tense, those impossible coppery eyes fixed on her like he could see straight through her skin. Eve pushed herself up. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. His gaze darkened, moving over her in a way that made her pulse falter. "That's not important," he said. "What matters is no one can hide certain things forever." The words hit her like ice. Eve's breath caught. Did he somehow see the truth she had spent her whole life protecting? Before she could ask, she heard a voice calling from behind her. "Miss Eve." It was Eugene, her aunt's butler, coming down the path with a lantern searching for her. Relief rushed through her. She turned toward him, waving. But when Eve looked back, the stranger was gone. But Eve should have known then. Some strangers don't disappear. They return. And when they do, they change your life forever. What she didn't realize was that she had met this man before. 20 years ago at a fair. The smell had pulled her into the fair. Caramel buns, warm, golden, impossible to resist, but she did not have any money. Her hand reached. "You little rat," the merchant snarled. I didn't touch them." All eyes turned to 10-year-old Eve, waiting for the merchant to punish her. But before that could happen, a voice came from the crowd. "Stop, let her go." A boy stepped forward, 10 years old. The crowd bowed in front of him. "How dare you touch what belongs to the Moriarty?" "She is my servant," he lied coldly. The name Moriarty was enough. The merchant let go. The boy extended his hand and she took it. They walked a few steps. And then, she forgot her mother's warning. Never cry. Not in front of anyone, or they will find out. The boy turned. Her breath broke. A tear slipped free. It hit the ground. Not as water. As something else. A pearl. Perfect. Luminous. Impossible. The boy froze in shock, not able to believe the miracle he had just witnessed. Before he could ask anything or harm her, Eve bit his hand and ran. The boy, Vincent, slipped the pearl into his pocket. A memory he could not forget. And Eve ran home, regretting that she had almost revealed her secret. That. She was not human. She was a mermaid. And today she had met him again, unknowingly. Eve rushed inside and closed the door behind her, her breath still uneven from the cold. She checked her face first, then her neck. There were no scales. Relief came instantly, sharp and overwhelming, but it didn't last. Her eyes dropped lower. The beige fabric of her dress had turned completely transparent, revealing all her curves, plastered to her body like a second skin. She was embarrassed that the man had seen it all. Her fingers tightened at her sides before she turned sharply and pulled the dress off. Her scales weren't visible. Small relief. The last time they had been seen, her mother had paid for it with her life. It took her back to a dark memory. The night her mother died. Rebecca, Eve's mother, poured salt into her palms and began rubbing it into Eve's skin. "Stay still," she whispered, her voice breaking. Golden scales shimmered across her legs, spreading beneath the water. The scales resisted at first, catching the light, refusing to disappear. Rebecca pressed harder, her hands trembling. "Please, just stay still." They both froze. A man stood in the doorway, Rebecca's wealthy client, his eyes locked on Eve's legs, watching. "They'd pay a fortune for you," he said slowly. "Give that mermaid to me and I won't harm you." Rebecca grabbed a piece of marble from the floor and drove it near his eye. "Run, Eve, run." Eve didn't think. She ran. Behind her, the man walked toward Rebecca. Eve didn't turn. Rebecca had sacrificed herself to keep Eve safe. That night, Eve collapsed near the edge of the stream, her body going still as the cold finally took over. The moonlight caught the golden scales across her skin. Footsteps approached. Lady Aubrey slowed as she entered the clearing, her gaze drawn immediately to the unnatural light. She stepped closer, taking in the child, the water, the scales. She understood what she was looking at, but she still decided to save Eve, despite knowing what she was. Lady Aubrey asked her butler Eugene to help her lift the girl. He did not question it. He stepped forward and carefully gathered the unconscious child into his arms, while Lady Aubrey covered her legs with her cloak. They had not hesitated. Not that night, not once in the 20 years since. Lady Aubrey sat still, the newspaper open but unread. "Drink your tea," she said. "You're soaked." Eve didn't move. 8 families? Lady Aubrey continued, her voice tightening. "Every one of them refused you? None of them want you as their governess, I know. You poured tea on a woman. It was an accident. You argued with a man in his own study. He said women shouldn't have opinions. And Mr. Walsh..." Lady Aubrey lowered the paper. "You slapped him." Silence. "He put his hands on me," Eve said, steady, "and suggested I earn the job differently." "I know," Lady Aubrey said quietly. "The damage is done, Miss Barlow. Word is out and no one will hire you now." Eugene appeared in the doorway, holding a letter. "This came for you," he said finally. "From Skellington." Something in the room shifted. He stepped forward and handed it to her. She read it. Once, then again. Her expression changed. "They want me," she said quietly. "For a governess position." A pause. "Which family?" Lady Aubrey asked with confusion. Eve said, "Moriarty." No one spoke. "I've never heard that name," Eugene said slowly. "Neither have I," Eve replied. Her grip tightened on the letter. "They know everything. The rejections, Walsh, all of it. And they still want me." Silence deepened. Eugene exhaled slowly. "A family in Skellington," he said, "doesn't hire women like you. They certainly don't choose them after 8 refusals." "That's not an offer," he said. "That's a trap." Eve didn't argue, didn't deny it. She folded the letter carefully. "I know," she said. She stood, moved toward the stairs. "Miss Eve, let me find something about the family." "You shouldn't accept until then," Eugene said. She stopped. 8 families said no, she said. This one didn't, and I need to know why. I leave in the morning. Eve lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, telling herself this was luck, that it was finally her turn. But it wasn't. It had nothing to do with her. It had everything to do with something older, something hidden. A pearl, 20 years old, locked in a drawer in Skellington, and a man who had never forgotten it, who had just found her again. But the question remains, did he find her intentionally, or was fate trying to bring them together? 11 minutes. Eve stepped out of the house early, dressed carefully, her hair tied back neatly. She steadied herself. No breaking vases, no pouring tea, no slapping, she muttered under her breath. Today I get the job. A young girl sat at the piano, unmoving. She did not look at Eve, did not move. Eve sat beside her and played a soft note. "When I was your age, I avoided this instrument entirely," Eve said lightly. "You're already doing better than I ever did." The girl turned, watched her. Eve approached carefully. "Do you dislike having a governess?" No response. "Why did your last governess leave?" Eve asked. "Since when did governesses become so curious?" A man spoke. Eve turned. It was him. The man from the rain, standing like he belonged there. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "This is my house." The realization settled. This could not be true. "Is she your..." Eve asked, glancing at the girl. "My sister," he replied. A pause. Then without warning, "How is your bottom?" Vincent asked. Her eyes widened instantly. "Going by your anger that day," he continued calmly. "It seemed like you fell rather hard." The memory hit, sharp, humiliating. His tone hadn't changed. That made it worse. Eve stepped back slightly. "I would like to be excused," she said quickly, offering a brief bow. "Thank you for having me here." She turned. This was a mistake. There was no way she could work under the same roof as this man. Not with his tone. Not with the way he looked at her like he already knew too much. "Quitting already?" he said behind her. "That was faster than I expected." She walked toward the door. "Please," the girl whispered. Vincent's gaze shifted briefly to his sister. He understood. "Miss Barlow." She stopped. "I don't think future employers would appreciate knowing," he said calmly, "that you adjusted certain parts of your academic record to get the job." Her breath caught. "How do you know that?" He held her gaze, unblinking. "This is my house, and things don't remain hidden here." Silence stretched. Then, Eve's attention shifted past him. Two men crossed the corridor. One of them had a scar near his eye. Memory hit hard. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. "Lennon Morris." Looking at the man with the scar took her back to the night her mother died, and she had to find out if it was really him. "I'll take the job," she said. A pause. Vincent stepped closer. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Eve nodded. Not for him. For the truth. Vincent studied her for a moment. Then his gaze dipped, just slightly. "You're hired," Vincent said finally. A faint smile lingered. Controlled, dangerous. "I look forward to seeing how long you last." "Master Vincent Moriarty," he said calmly, placing a gold coin and 2 silver coins into Eve's hand. "That is how everyone addresses me here. Go on, try it." A pause. "Yes, Master Vincent." A faint, satisfied look crossed his face. "As I am the one who hired you," he added, voice low and controlled, "you answer only to me. I trust you understand." There was a warning in it. Eve heard it. 15 minutes. The next morning, Eve stepped into the mansion thinking it was going to be better than yesterday. She was wrong. "Where do you think you're going?" Eve turned. A woman stood at the center of the corridor, perfectly composed, as though the house itself had arranged itself around her. Lady Annalise Moriarty. Dark hair pinned flawlessly, eyes that held the kind of authority that expected obedience before a word was spoken. "I am the newly appointed governess, milady." "To whom?" Lady Annalise asked. Her tone controlled but edged. "To Miss Allie." A soft, disbelieving laugh escaped her. "How strange. No one informed me my daughter had been assigned a governess. Mrs. Moriarty. I was appointed yesterday." "No," Lady Annalise said with a faint smile. "You were not. You may leave." Eve straightened. "I have already been paid for the month." "Keep it," Lady Annalise replied smoothly. "Consider it charity. Perhaps you can invest in more appropriate shoes." An early quarrel in the morning, Vincent Moriarty's voice cut in, calm and amused. "How delightful." Both women turned. Vincent walked toward them, unhurried, his presence immediately shifting the air. Lady Annalise's expression hardened. "With whose permission did you think you could appoint a governess for Allie?" "Mine," Vincent replied evenly. "You don't have the authority." "That's where you're mistaken," Vincent interrupted, his tone still calm but unmistakably final. "Being Allie's elder brother, I have every right to ensure she is guided properly, especially when others choose not to." A flicker of anger crossed Lady Annalise's face. "No governess stays here without my approval." Vincent held her gaze. "The decision has already been made. This discussion is over." He turned to Eve. "Miss Barlow, you are late." The command was quiet, but it carried weight. Eve moved past them both. She spent the first 2 hours teaching Allie, whose responses were limited to quiet nods and small shakes of her head. But when Eve praised her, the girl's hands clenched with barely contained happiness. At lunch, Lady Annalise informed Edouard, Vincent's father, that Vincent had hired the governess without her knowledge. Edouard was pleased. Annalise was not. "Hiring a reputed governess would only spread word about what is wrong with Allie," she said quietly. "It is better this way before it brings unnecessary shame to the family." Eve sat alone on a garden bench for lunch, unaware of the man watching her from the corridor. Charles Gallagher, Annalise's brother, stood still, his gaze fixed on her with unsettling intensity. His eyes followed the curve of her neck, the rise and fall of her breath. His expression shifted as he got closer, something darker surfacing. Hunger. Not human. His lips parted slightly, revealing the faintest hint of fangs. A bee circled near Eve's face. She leaned back to avoid it. Her grip slipped. Food splattered forward, straight onto Charles. He stopped, completely still. The creamy sauce slid slowly down his face. Eve turned quickly. "Are you all right?" For a moment, neither of them moved. The hunger didn't disappear. It sharpened. "You will regret that," Charles said quietly, taking a step toward her. Eve instinctively moved back. "I was wondering where that smell came from." Vincent's voice cut in sharply. "Uncle Charles, you stink." Charles didn't take his eyes off Eve. This insolent girl threw her food at me. Then it was an accident, Vincent replied calmly. And you would be wise to leave it at that. Charles's jaw tightened. She should be punished. Vincent stepped in fast, pulling Eve back as Charles advanced. This is little Allie's governess, and she would very much like this woman to continue working here, as would I. Charles scoffed, but backed off under Vincent's gaze. Vincent turned to Eve. 1 silver coin will be deducted from your wages next month, as a consequence of your actions today. Consider this the easiest way to get off the hook. 15:30. You did very well today, Miss Allie, Eve said gently. I'll see you tomorrow. She stepped into the corridor and came face to face with a young woman. Dark curls, a lilac dress sweeping the floor, every inch a Moriarty. You must be the new governess, Marceline said. A sharp look quickly softened to sweetness. Miss Barlow, Eve bowed. I am. I hope Allie is behaving well. She's a delight to teach. That she is, Marceline smiled. She is, after all, a Moriarty. Eve held her smile, but something about that tone didn't sit right. After Eve left, Marceline went to find Annalise. She laid a necklace carefully on the table. Pearls caught the candlelight. Soft, luminous, almost breathing. Almost. Is this what I think it is? Annalise leaned forward slowly. Marceline smiled. Not from oysters, from mermaids. Lady Annalise picked it up, turning it between her fingers, studying the glow. They're nearly extinct, Marceline added lightly, which makes them incredibly valuable. When Edward asked what I wanted for my birthday, Annalise said slowly, I told him, mermaid blood. Marceline's eyes gleamed. I wouldn't mind a few drops myself. Lady Annalise looked at her, then smiled. Of course, we share. A few moments later, Marceline walked the long corridor, her expression composed again, every trace of excitement carefully tucked away. At the far end, Vincent stood speaking with the butler, his posture relaxed, his attention elsewhere. Marceline's smile returned instantly. Brother Vincent, I missed you. I wish I could say the same, he replied dryly. She didn't react. I hear you've hired another governess, Marceline said, her tone casual, almost curious. It was necessary, Vincent answered. A village girl? Marceline tilted her head slightly. How practical. That made him look at her. Vincent stepped closer. Close enough to make it intentional. He placed a hand lightly on her head. Don't hesitate, he said, a faint smirk forming. If you need guidance, I'm sure she'll be useful. For a second, Marceline's smile held, then tightened. Vincent removed his hand before she could respond. Turned. Walked away. Marceline stood still, watching him go. In this house, even affection felt like strategy, and every word carried weight. Leaving the mansion, Eve walked into chaos near her home in Meadow. A crowd had gathered in the square. Guards dragged a man and woman across the ground in chains. Eve spoke up for them, too loud, too fast. The head guard turned. He grabbed the woman forward, seized her neck. Her eyes shifted, slitted, inhuman. The crowd recoiled instantly. Fear replaced sympathy. Any more questions? The guard asked, staring directly at Eve. Or are you one of them? One of Eve's many admirers, Patrick Humphrey, stood there too. Noticing how the head guard was trying to corner Eve, Mr. Humphrey decided to act as her knight in shining armor. He spoke in a loud voice. Septimus, what do you think you are doing by talking to Miss Barlow in such a tone? The head guard turned to look at Mr. Humphrey with a glare. Mr. Humphrey stated, Don't you know how to speak to a woman respectfully? Mr. Humphrey's sentence was interrupted when the head guard caught him by the collar, and he was raised above the ground. You whimsical humans, don't forget who you are talking to. That is enough. Noah Sullivan stepped forward, calm and composed. You've made your point, Septimus. There's no need to threaten civilians. The guard hesitated, then bowed slightly. Duke. The head guard's eyes met Noah's eyes, and he finally let go of Mr. Humphrey, who fell to the ground with a light thud. The prisoners were dragged off. The crowd broke. Silence returned. Eve exhaled. You must have been scared. Allow me to walk you to your home. It will also ease my mind, Mr. Humphrey offered Eve, not wanting to let go of the opportunity to get close to her. But as grateful as Eve was, she did not want Mr. Humphrey to cling to her. That is very kind of you, Mr. Humphrey, but I have something to discuss with Mr. Sullivan, if you don't mind. Before Mr. Humphrey could say something more, Mr. Sullivan offered a slight bow, and both he and Eve started to walk away from there. "How did your interview go?" Noah asked. "I got the job." "Then they made the right choice," he said. "The head guard addressed you as Duke." "Did your father pass down the title for you to take over the position?" Eve asked. "He did." Mr. Sullivan nodded. Eve offered a deep bow. "Then I suppose I should congratulate you on becoming Woodlock's Duke, Mr. Sullivan," Eve said. "Thank you, Miss Barlow. I can only hope to uphold and do justice to the title," replied Noah as they walked. He fell into step beside her, inviting her and Lady Aubrey and Eugene to join him for lunch the next day. She agreed without hesitation. The next morning, Eve returned to her work. Marceline was waiting at the gates. She fell into step beside Eve as they walked through the corridor, her tone warm but her words carefully weighted. "You should consider yourself fortunate, Miss Barlow," she said. "Most governesses don't last long enough here to be noticed." Eve kept her posture composed. "I wasn't aware I needed to be noticed to do my job." "Oh, everyone here is noticed," Marceline said softly, "especially when they forget what they are." A brief pause. The previous governess mistook kindness for permission. She spent her time speaking instead of teaching, crossing lines that were not hers to cross. Her tone remained gentle. Her words did not. She grew attached. And attachments, Marceline added, tend to end badly in this house. "Was she dismissed?" Eve asked. Marceline tilted her head. "Yes," she said. "That is one way to put it." Before Eve could press further, "How reassuring," Vincent's voice entered. "My sister educating the governess." Marceline turned to Eve with a smile that hadn't moved a muscle. "We'll continue this another time, Miss Barlow." And she left. Vincent turned to Eve. "Consider this your first lesson. Marceline is bad news." Eve frowned. "You're her brother." "Which is exactly why I'm warning you," he said, voice lowering. "Stay out of family matters, do your job, nothing more." He studied her. "What did she tell you about the last governess?" "That she was dismissed." Vincent laughed, low, knowing. "True," he said. "More true than you understand. Now get to work," he said, before she could ask further. Eve sat beside Allie, guiding her through her lessons. "You're doing well," she said gently. "You must miss your previous governess." Allie froze, then slowly reached for her book. A stick figure appeared. Allie pointed at it. "The governess?" Eve asked. A nod, then crosses over the eyes. Eve's breath hitched. Her voice dropped. "She wasn't dismissed," she whispered. "She died." Eve stared at the drawing in Allie's notebook, at the two small crosses over its eyes. "Miss Allie, is the governess dead?" The girl stilled. Then slowly, she nodded. Eve's breath caught sharply. That explained Vincent's laughter earlier. It hadn't been teasing. It had been truth. Allie lowered her gaze and began drawing again. Another stick figure, a smaller one beside it, their hands touching. She pointed at Eve, then at herself. A quiet offering. "That's comforting," Eve said softly. But her voice trembled. The child knew, and she was choosing what not to say. Eve stepped out into the corridor, her thoughts tangled and heavy. "I love your umbrella." She froze, turned. Allie stood in the doorway, watching her, speaking for the first time. Eve blinked, surprised, then smiled. "Thank you. You have a lovely voice. You should speak more." The girl only nodded, and just like that, the silence returned. And then Eve saw him in the corridor, the man with the scar. Her heart skipped. Her feet moved before she could think. She followed him, quiet, careful, until he disappeared. Gone. "What do you think you are doing here?" came a voice from behind. Eve turned sharply. Lady Annalise stood there, watching. Eve bowed quickly. "My apologies, milady. I lost my way." Lady Annalise stepped closer. "How about we come to an agreement? I will give you a year's wages, leave, never return." Eve hesitated. The offer weighed on her. Then she shook her head. "No." A flicker of irritation crossed Annalise's face. "I will double it." Silence stretched. "I cannot be bought," Eve said firmly. Lady Annalise leaned in. "Then listen carefully," she whispered. "Leave, or the people you love will suffer." Eve's fists clenched. Lady Aubrey, Eugene, her only family. Annalise smiled, and then her eyes turned red. Fangs revealed. The truth settled in, cold and undeniable. This was not just a mansion. It was a predator's den. Eve stood frozen, breathing uneven, because now she knew exactly what she was living with: vampires. After returning home, Eve sat beside Lady Aubrey, her fingers cold despite the warmth of the room. The Moriartys are vampires. Lady Aubrey did not react the way Eve expected. She only nodded slightly and asked, "How do you feel about it?" Eve let out a slow breath, like, "I need to be careful. If they ever taste my blood, it's over." The weight of it lingered between them. After a moment, Eve stood. "I'm going to the river, to clear my head." "Stay out of trouble," Lady Aubrey said quietly. 45 minutes. The forest was quiet, just the sound of insects and distant water guiding her path. Eve moved deeper until the town disappeared behind her. She reached the riverbank, checked her surroundings, and slowly stepped into the cold water. She pulled out the small container of salts and rubbed them carefully along her legs, watching the grains dissolve against her skin and leave no trace behind. This was not a ritual. It was survival. Without it, her scales would betray her. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Seems like water ran out in some houses. Eve froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she turned. Vincent stood a few steps away, watching her. Calm, composed, and far too comfortable. Her scream ripped through the forest before she could stop it. Vincent flinched slightly. "Impressive," he said dryly. "I didn't realize you could be heard across counties." Eve snatched her clothes, clutching them to herself as heat rushed to her face. "Do not move, and don't you dare turn around." Vincent tilted his head, amused. "You assume I wasn't already looking." Her breath hitched. "You? I must say," he continued smoothly, "for someone so concerned about being seen, you do choose rather open locations." Eve gritted her teeth, mortified. "You are insufferable, and you are careless," he replied without missing a beat. "A dangerous combination." She dressed as quickly as she could, refusing to meet his eyes. When she finally turned, her anger steadied her. "Lady Annalise threatened me," she said. "She said she would hurt my family." Vincent let out a soft chuckle, as if she had said something mildly entertaining rather than alarming. "You don't need to worry about her. She will not act while I am involved." Eve frowned. "You sound very certain." "I am," he replied simply. There was something in his tone, quiet, absolute, that made her pause. Voices and footsteps approached through the trees. "Wait," she said, moving toward him. "Don't leave me here." Vincent glanced at her. "And here I thought you enjoyed danger." "I'm not afraid," Eve replied quickly. Vincent's gaze dropped briefly to her throat. "Then why is your heart beating so fast?" He turned and walked. Eve followed without thinking, closing the space between them as the torchlight flickered through the trees behind. "Stay close," Vincent said quietly, "or you'll draw attention." They moved quickly until the trees began to thin, and the glow of the town appeared ahead. He stopped just before the open path. "Dry your hair," he said casually. "Unless you want questions you can't answer." Then he stepped away into the dark. He didn't look back. The next morning, whispers spread through the town. The witch has returned. Livestock are being killed again. Eugene paused mid-step, confused. He had spread that rumor himself, years ago, to scare people away from the riverbank at night and leave a clear path for Eve to bathe safely. He hadn't expected it to resurface. Now Eve ran the risk of being hunted not only as a mermaid, but for something she wasn't. Eve arrived at the mansion the next morning, still recovering from a cold. Vincent was waiting at the gate. "What a surprise," he said, removing his gloves with slow precision. "I was certain you wouldn't come." "Why wouldn't I, Master Vincent? I know my responsibilities." Vincent tilted his head, studying her. "You've fallen ill? Strange. The last time I saw you, you were in perfect health." His gaze lingered deliberately. He then glanced at Eugene. I know you. You were asking questions about my family." Eugene froze. "You could have asked me directly," Vincent added, almost pleasantly. Eve stepped in sharply. "You should go, Eugene." He left, and just like that, she was alone with him. As they walked through the corridor, Vincent leaned toward her slightly. "I had almost forgotten yesterday's incident, but you seem to have difficulty letting it go. I don't know what you're talking about. Would you like me to remind you? About the soft and round—" "Don't," Eve snapped. "Soft and round what?" Marceline appeared. Vincent didn't miss a beat. "The moon," he said smoothly. "Soft light, round shape." Marceline lost interest immediately. Vincent walked away. "I hope my brother isn't troubling you," Marceline said warmly, stepping closer. "He can be difficult." Marceline took Eve for tea, and shortly after, her friend Stella arrived. A vampiress who regarded Eve with barely concealed contempt. "Who is this?" "The governess," Marceline said lightly. "From Meadow?" Stella's tone sharpened, and then gave Eve a look full of disgust. "Since when do you take tea with the governess?" Stella asked Marceline. "She's unwell." "You don't say," Stella replied, almost offended. "I don't think I've ever been this close to someone from there." A beat. "No matter how excellent she is," Stella added quietly. "How do you let someone like her into this house?" Eve heard it, all of it, and said nothing. "We don't drink from our governesses," Marceline replied lightly. Stella smiled. "No, you just kill them." Silence. "Don't be silly," Marceline replied, but no one laughed. Eve walked out, understanding something clearly. This house didn't hide what it was. It showed you, and waited to see if you would stay. Eve overheard Lady Annalise berating Allie in a nearby room. Through the slightly open door, she saw the woman standing over her daughter, her expression cold and unforgiving. "You cannot do one thing right, can you?" Annalise said sharply. Allie stood still, her head lowered. "I am sorry, Mother," she whispered. "You are a Moriarty," Annalise replied. "Start behaving like one." She slipped away to wait for the girl in the piano room. When Allie arrived, her eyes lit up at the sight of Eve. "Let us try something different today," Eve said. "We will go to the garden." Outside, they sat among the flowers while a butterfly hovered near Allie's hands. Eve reached for a rose, a thorn pricked her finger, and a bead of blood formed instantly. Bright, dangerous, mermaid blood in a house full of vampires. It was a death sentence. She stared at it for a fraction of a second too long. Before she could react, Allie's hand moved toward it with quiet, instinctive curiosity, and panic surged through Eve as she dropped the flowers and covered the drop with trembling hands. "What are you doing?" Lady Annalise demanded, striding toward them. Eve pressed her finger into her dress, hiding the blood, while Allie was sent inside. Eve held her ground. "I'm only doing my job, milady." After a tense pause, Annalise turned and left. Eve crouched slowly and brushed the flowers aside, searching the ground. She exhaled when she saw only a faint stain remaining. One drop had nearly ended everything. That evening, Eve walked through the quiet corridor and noticed Senior Mr. Moriarty speaking with Lennon Morris near the entrance. She slowed just enough to hear Morris instruct the coachman, "Little teeth's in." Something in her chest tightened. She decided to follow. Lantern light painted the room in green and orange as Eve slipped inside and took a seat a few tables away from Morris. She watched him carefully, memorizing everything, waiting. Years of waiting had led her here. She could wait a little longer if it meant finding the truth about her mother's killer. Morris sat with a woman who was clearly not his wife, his arm draped around her waist, whispering into her ear. When Eve glanced across the room, she froze. Noah Sullivan had just entered, being led to another table by the inn steward. She turned quickly, not wanting to be seen. A man approached her table, smiling too easily, his hand resting on her chair. "May I join you?" Eve stood at once. "I was just leaving. My children are waiting for me." She grabbed her umbrella. As she walked away, the hook of her umbrella caught the man's leg. He stumbled, spilling his drink across the table beside Morris. The woman beside him shrieked as liquid splashed across her dress and onto Morris. Eve did not stop. She turned once and met Morris's eyes. He frowned, searching her face, trying to place her. She moved toward the exit before Noah could notice her and disappeared into the passage. The next morning at the Moriarty house, she was dragged inside a room without warning. Morris's hand locked around her throat, pinning her against the wall. "Have you told anyone you saw me?" he demanded. Eve struggled for breath. "No," she said. "I didn't tell anyone." His grip tightened. "Was it my wife who told you to spy on me?" "I don't know her," Eve forced out. She stared at his scar. Her eyes traced every line of it. And then she realized. His voice didn't match the voice she had carried in her memory for 20 years, the voice of the man who had killed her mother. He wasn't the one. She was sure. She struck him hard, then drove her knee into him. Morris collapsed with a groan. He stared at her, stunned, furious, confused. "Well," Vincent's voice entered, calm and amused. "This is unexpected." He stepped in, tea in hand, as if he had walked into a performance. Morris got up and tried to speak, but Vincent flicked his forehead, sending him crashing back down. "Let us not make this unpleasant," Vincent said lightly. Eve left without waiting, desperate to get away from Morris. She had followed the lead, and found nothing. The truth remained buried, and she was running out of places to look. Eve moved quickly through the corridor, her fingers brushing her neck unconsciously, still feeling the pressure Morris had left behind. "Morris seems to have squeezed your neck quite hard," Vincent said from behind her, and she froze instantly. He stepped in beside her, far too close, his fingers grazing her skin before she could move away, and his gaze lingered as if he had every right to inspect what wasn't his. He came closer, his gaze settling on her neck. "The marks aren't visible yet, but they will be." Eve pulled back at once. "I will manage. Wear a high-collared dress. We wouldn't want Allie asking questions." "I will take care of it, Master Vincent." "Good. Now go, you're late." Inside, Eve finished Allie's lesson warmly, mentioning almost casually that tomorrow was her day off, and she might visit Lily's inn. The cakes there were said to be excellent. For the first time, Allie's quiet expression lifted slightly. Eve left on time. Noah came to pick her up for lunch, while Vincent and Miss Rosetta Hook were also supposed to go out that afternoon. Vincent took hours to get ready, deliberately. When he finally emerged, Allie tugged at his sleeve. "Brother Vincent," she said softly, "can you please get me a cake from Lily's inn? Please." Vincent sighed. "If I pass by, I will get one." Allie raised 4 fingers. "What a greedy little thing." She hugged him. He stiffened. "Enough," he said flatly. She stepped back instantly, and Vincent left. Rosetta Hook stood at the entrance, perfectly composed but visibly irritated. When the carriage arrived, Vincent did not step out to greet her, remaining seated inside as if her presence required nothing from him. Rosetta entered anyway. The carriage stopped before a modest inn. Rosetta's dissatisfaction sharpened immediately. "This is not Hollow Valley. This is where we are eating," Vincent said, ending the matter. "We were meant to dine in Hollow Valley," she said. "You can eat where I take you, or you can starve," Vincent replied, not looking at her. Inside, Eve sat across from Noah, the ease between them briefly grounding her, though she noticed how quickly he denied they were a couple when the waitress asked about a private table. After a moment, she excused herself. In the powder room, Eve was adjusting her scarf, carefully hiding the marks on her neck, when the door opened and a young woman in white stepped inside, crying incessantly. Eve quietly offered Rosetta her handkerchief. "You can use this," she said gently. Rosetta hesitated, studying her as if searching for intent. She took it anyway, pressed it to her face, steadying herself. When she lowered the cloth, she assessed Eve from head to toe. "Keep it," she said. "You need it more than me." And she left. Eve stepped out and stopped. Vincent was already there. "Noah, the Duke of Woodlock," he said, his gaze shifting past her before returning sharper. "You choose interesting company. We are friends. Men and women rarely are." "I am not interested in your opinions." He was amused. "You are far more interesting when you argue." Eve turned away first, but even as she walked, she could still feel it. His attention, fixed and deliberate. Eve returned to the table. Noah looked up immediately, noticing the slight shift in her posture. She resumed their conversation to something ordinary, and eventually she and Noah stood to leave. "I'll see you again?" Noah asked. She hesitated only a second. "Yes." Later, Rosetta and Vincent also left. Vincent had 8 cakes packed for Allie. Rosetta's silence on the ride back was sharper than any argument. Rosetta finally broke it. "You humiliated me." Vincent didn't respond immediately. "You assumed something that was never promised," he said at last. The words landed harder than anger. By the time the carriage stopped at her estate, Rosetta did not wait for assistance. She stepped down on her own at her estate, dignity intact. Vincent did not watch her leave. That evening, Allie had been waiting in her room. The moment Vincent walked in with the box, her restraint broke. She rushed forward and hugged him tightly, thanking him with quiet excitement. He stiffened at the contact, clearly unprepared. but he allowed it for one brief second. The next morning, a letter arrived from the Hook family. Lady Annalise was standing when she read it. That was not a good sign. Vincent had already entered, pouring himself tea. "You look disappointed," he remarked lightly. "The Hook family has declined the proposal." Vincent stirred his tea once. How unfortunate. The lack of reaction was deliberate. "You humiliated her," Annalise said sharply. If the Hooks withdraw over one evening, they were never worth keeping. He lifted his cup and walked past her, ending the conversation before she could reclaim it. Marceline appeared beside Annalise and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "First the governess and now this," Annalise said with a frown. "Soon people will forget what it means to respect the Moriarty name." They won't, Marceline replied calmly. "I won't allow it, and neither will Vincent. The situation can still be corrected," she said smoothly. "A simple invitation to the upcoming ball would give Miss Hook a reason to return without losing face." Annalise's expression eased. "You are right," she said quietly. Marceline came to the piano room while Eve was teaching Allie, bringing the official ball invitation along with a gorgeous folded gown shimmering under the candlelight. "Think of this as an apology for what happened with Mr. Morris." Eve's fingers brushed the fabric. "Beautiful, unnecessary, dangerous. I don't think I can accept something so grand." "It would be a waste otherwise," Marceline replied, her smile steady. "Do not hesitate." When she left, the room felt heavier. Allie moved closer to the dress, tracing the fabric. "Will you come?" she asked softly. Eve exhaled. "I don't know. Don't," Allie whispered. Eve wondered what Allie meant. A while later, Eve stepped out of the mansion, her arms overloaded with the gown and her umbrella. Above, from the balcony, Marceline watched, still, observing. "Such a pitiful thing," she murmured, her tone soft but far from kind. And then someone shouted, "Miss!" Eve paused, adjusting her grip before turning. It was the woman from the inn's powder room, Rosetta, approaching with surprising eagerness. What a coincidence. She slipped her arm around Eve's, called for a carriage, and insisted on dropping her home. During the ride, Rosetta spoke endlessly, while Eve listened, careful and distant. At Meadow, Eve stepped down. "I hope we meet again," Rosetta said eagerly. The moment the carriage disappeared, Eve finally exhaled. Once in her room, Eve decided to try on Lady Marceline's gown. Eve tried to wear it after pulling the zip down. She started from below, but when she pulled it further up, the gown stuck below her waist. After a minute of trying to pull it up, she gave up and decided to wear it from above. But when she did that, the gown didn't move down from her bosom. Eve thought to herself that if she were ever going to wear this dress, she would have to lose some more weight so that she could fit into it. But in an effort to get out of the dress, Eve heard a loud tear in the room, and her eyes went wide. No! The harsh tear didn't stop, and Eve noticed the zip hadn't been able to hold itself. Horrified, Eve wondered where she would now get a good enough gown from. A week later, at her home, Eve was helping Aunt Aubrey write a letter to a relative. Then, a knock came, unexpectedly. Eve kept the quill aside. "Aunt, stay here," she said softly before moving toward the door. She pulled it open, and everything in her body locked. Vincent Moriarty stood at the threshold, composed and uninvited, his dark coat catching the dim light. His presence completely out of place in their modest home. "Mr. Moriarty?" He stepped inside without hesitation. "I received word that an unknown creature is hiding in Meadow. I've come to find it." The room shifted instantly. Eugene and Lady Aubrey stood still, the same fear behind their silence. Eve's expression remained composed. "An unknown creature?" she repeated carefully. Vincent settled into a chair, crossed one leg over the other, and spoke as if the conversation were entirely ordinary. "Rumors say a siren has been living among the people of Meadow. Cattle deaths, enchanted victims." Eve's pulse tightened. Sirens killed, mermaids hid. The difference didn't matter to people like him. Minutes later, Vincent sat comfortably, his empty cup at his side, speaking as if they were discussing the weather. "If a creature has concealed itself here, the evidence always surfaces eventually. People are never as careful as they believe themselves to be." His eyes moved around the room, settling briefly on Eve. She held his gaze and did not flinch. The guards had arrived. Eve's breath slowed deliberately as she forced calm into her body. The head guard's voice cut through the night outside. "Everyone in the house, Step outside now." For a moment, Eve thought it was all over. Vincent placed his empty cup down. He stepped outside. His authority shifted the air. "This house is clear. Move on," he ordered. The guards obeyed instantly. Just like that, it was over. But not really. The town gathered quickly, pulled by fear and curiosity. Eve stood among them, her eyes fixed on the woman dragged forward in chains. "The siren," someone whispered. The woman screamed, sharp and unnatural. Eve flinched. The creature's eyes darted wildly, then locked onto her. For a second, everything stopped. Because the siren recognized what Eve was. Something glimmered in those snake-like eyes. Not aggression, but knowing. Recognition. And the mouth opened, as if to speak. "Give me the sword," the guard ordered. The siren opened her mouth. But before anything could be said, the head fell. Silence broke into noise, gasps, cheers, fear. Vincent stood at a distance, watching, unmoved, smoke curling from his lips as if none of it mattered. Eve couldn't look away, not from the blood, not from the fact that she could have been the one standing there. The siren had been about to say something about her, and now she never would. That night, sleep didn't come easily, because Eve understood something clearly. They weren't hunting monsters, they were hunting anything that didn't belong. The next morning, Lady Annalise stopped Eve in the hallway. "There is a ball in 3 days. You will attend if Allie requires assistance. Consider this a gracious invitation. Forgive me, milady, but I had already told Lady Marceline I might not be able to attend." "That was not a question," Annalise replied, her gaze sharpening. "If your priorities lie elsewhere, you are free to resign. We do not tolerate refusal." The smile that followed carried no warmth, and just like that, the choice was gone. Relief flickered when Eve spotted Vincent walking toward her. "I've been asked to attend the ball. I cannot attend, please." Vincent stopped, studied her. "Something the matter? Or have you suddenly developed fear toward my kind?" "It's not that." "Then what is it?" His eyes held hers, cold and deliberate. The answer slipped out before she could stop it. "I don't have a suitable dress." A faint smile touched his lips. "I'm certain you do. Considering you don't look homeless, someone must have already provided one." He knew that his sister had given him a dress. Of course he did. A soft chuckle escaped him before he dismissed her with a flick of his hand and walked away, ending the conversation as if it had never mattered. Eve stood there, the weight of it settling in. Inside, Allie sat at the piano, her small fingers still over the keys after missing a note. "I am scared," she whispered. "They will ask me to play at the ball." Eve softened instantly. "When you play, you focus too much on mistakes. You forget to enjoy the music." She sat beside her and played a soft, flowing piece, letting it fill the room. "If you pour your heart into it, no one will notice the errors." Allie looked at her. For a moment, she almost smiled. "If it helps," Eve added quietly, "I will attend the ball." Allie's eyes widened and she was about to smile, but she quickly closed her mouth and faced the piano keys again. Not knowing what happened suddenly, Eve asked in concern, "Are you all right, Miss Allie?" Don't look at me," uttered the little girl. The room was hostile again, as it was when Eve first entered. The little girl didn't speak, nor did she look in her direction. A few seconds later, Eve heard footsteps outside the room. The air shifted when Marceline entered. She dismissed Allie with ease, sending her out of the room before turning to Eve. "There is something you should know," she said, her back to the window. "I lied about something to you before, because I didn't want to scare you. The governess wasn't just fired. She was killed, for being too close to my little sister. And it has left Allie traumatized. It is also one of the reasons why my mother wasn't happy when Vincent hired you." Eve kept her voice steady. She had already suspected as much. Why wasn't the governess taken somewhere Allie wouldn't see? Marceline was taken aback. She'd been expecting a frightened mess, someone ready to run. Instead, questions. The person who killed her didn't share the same views about time or place, but the woman should have followed the rules. Who killed the earlier governess? "It was my brother," Marceline replied quietly. "Vincent. Sometimes his anger knows no bounds. He won't see the place or the time." She paused and then added almost gently, "I wonder if he felt bad for it, and decided to bring in a decent one this time. One who would follow his words." "You have been doing well so far, Miss Barlow." I doubt he would repeat it. But there was doubt in her voice. And it struck doubt in Eve's mind. When Eve was looking for a job, she had prepared her mind for the worst possibility. But she had never considered this situation, not from this angle. At least she knew now. The next time she and Vincent were alone, she would have to run. But then she remembered. He didn't care about time or place. Eve stepped out of the mansion, her thoughts restless, her steps quicker than usual as she headed toward the carriage stop. That was when she saw Rosetta standing. The young vampiress noticed her instantly and waved with surprising eagerness before walking toward her. "Fate seems to bring us together again," Rosetta said with a bright smile. Eve returned a polite bow. "I just need to catch the carriage. I have to buy some clothes." Rosetta paused, then smiled. "How fortunate. I was just about to go shopping for a gown myself." Eve hesitated, already sensing the lack of choice. "If you don't mind," Rosetta continued, stepping closer, "may I join you?" In Hollow Valley, the boutique gowns shimmered at prices Eve could not touch. Rosetta purchased without hesitation while Eve looked at prices she couldn't afford. "You are looking for a cheap gown?" the seamstress, Mrs. Capra, asked. "I am," Eve nodded. "Young lady, you should know that nothing cheap is not just in this shop, but in the entire Hollow Valley." "Forgive me if I have offended you," Eve said. "What if I exchange a gown? The fabric might be of some use to you," the seamstress said. "It has been a while since I have encountered someone like you. Let me see the dress that you want to exchange. I believe that it is of value. Bring it to me later, and we shall speak then." Eve returned later, alone, when the streets had transformed and the crowds grown denser. The seamstress, Mrs. Capra, looked at the gown Eve brought her before dropping it on the table. "The gown you brought is falling apart. Take a closer look, and you will see the threads being pulled harshly." "Who gave it to you?" asked the seamstress. Eve replied, "The gown was given to me by my employer's sister." Just looking at the gown was enough for the woman to know that the gown was of poor quality, and not something the employer's sister would have worn because the material used was an imitation of the original and poorly made. "If you want my advice, avoid wearing this one." The seamstress led her into a dim back room. "You won't afford what's outside," she said bluntly, "but perhaps something here." She produced a pastel blue gown, simple and elegant, from an old trunk. The woman who owned it died. People believe such things carry misfortune. Eve didn't, or perhaps she couldn't afford to. She accepted it anyway. With the gown secured, Eve wandered toward the shoe shops, her gaze lingering on what she couldn't afford. That was when she saw him, Vincent, across the street. Before she could turn away, he noticed her. A faint smile touched his lips, and he walked in her direction. "Have you decided to abandon your position and guard this shop instead?" he asked casually. "I was looking at the shoes, I could tell." "Step inside. No room to refuse. You need a pair. I won't have my sister's governess attracting unnecessary attention." The shop owner greeted Vincent with immediate deference, his tone almost nervous. Shoes were brought out one pair after another, each more beautiful than the last, but none fit Eve. Each time her face tightened with discomfort, she tried to hide. Vincent watched, carefully, too carefully. "Are your shoes made for humans?" he asked the shopkeeper suddenly. The man stammered. "Of course, sir. Perhaps the lady—" "Move," Vincent said, and just like that, the man stepped aside. Vincent crouched in front of Eve, his hand closed around her ankle, cold and firm, lifting her foot as if it belonged to him. Eve's breath caught sharply, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat as heat rushed to her face. "Mr. Moriarty." "Quiet." His fingers traced the shape of her foot with deliberate precision, testing, pressing, observing. The shop fell utterly silent around them. The owner stood to one side, stunned, unwilling to intervene. Vincent did not look up. He did not rush. He turned her foot slightly, then pressed again at the base, as if he were measuring something he had been trying to understand for some time. And in that moment, Eve understood something with terrifying clarity. This was not about the shoes. It never had been. Was this the moment Vincent had been waiting for? What would he uncover if he looked just a little closer, if he noticed what no one else ever had? Eve's breath remained uneven as Vincent finally released her foot, as if nothing about the moment had been unusual. He picked up a pair of off-white shoes, running his fingers along the insole with quiet focus, and held them out. "Wear it." Eve slipped her feet in. The fit was perfect. "It fits," she murmured, almost surprised. "I told you," Vincent said, standing, his gaze settling on her. "Things can be adjusted." Heat rushed to her face. She had no reply but a nod. The shopkeeper clapped abruptly, relieved, and hurried to pack the shoes. Outside, Eve balanced her belongings as Vincent signaled his carriage forward. Before she could thank him, his voice cut in. "There is something you want to ask." Eve steadied herself. "I want to know if what I heard is true, about what happened with the previous governess." Vincent studied her briefly. "Believe what you wish. It doesn't concern me." Wind swept through the street, tugging at her hair. Eve steadied herself. What if it concerns Miss Allie? That was the wrong move. Vincent's eyes narrowed, something darker surfacing beneath the calm. "You seem attached to your curiosity," he said softly. "Careful. It might cost you more than you intend." "Get in," Vincent said, already stepping inside. The forest swallowed the road as silence stretched between them. Rain had begun again, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof of the carriage as the darkness thickened outside the windows. Eve stared straight ahead. Then Vincent spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "How brave of you," he said, "to sit here, after hearing that I killed the last governess." Eve's breath caught as the carriage moved deeper into darkness, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if she had just stepped into safety, or something far worse. Why did Vincent say such a thing? Did he find something that wasn't meant to be discovered at the shoe shop? Was this just another one of Vincent's mind games? Or was it a more sinister warning? The carriage moved through the moonlit forest, horse hooves steady against the dirt road. Eve sat across from Vincent Moriarty, feeling the weight of his gaze as he spoke about the previous governess he had killed. What did you want to talk about the hamster? Eve had no idea who he meant. Vincent let her sit in the silence until it clicked. "Allie." She cleared her throat. "Today, during a break, Miss Allie became scared. Lady Marceline told me it was because she had grown close with the previous governess before you killed her. Marceline is right, but she missed a few details." One corner of his lips pulled faintly upward. Eve spoke up. "The governess did something unforgivable, right? We pure-blooded vampires are prideful creatures. Mistakes aren't forgiven, especially ones inflicted on a family member. My mother Annalise assigned the previous governess. The thing is, both my sisters were born wrongly." "What do you mean, Master Vincent?" "The little one was born in the wrong house, more suitable to live as a human. And the other is a minion of the devil." Eve didn't comment. "Is that why Lady Annalise is strict with Miss Allie? Because she shows human emotions?" "Vampires and human emotions coincide, Miss Barlow." He clicked his tongue. "But sometimes there's too much in us." Allie was very fond of her previous governess, who had her own motives, to bring disgrace to the Moriarty family. Vincent's mind went back. He and Senior Mr. Moriarty had been far from Skellington discussing the treaty when Edward said, "If you're going home, see how your sister is doing. I thought she was having lunch. She's small and young. You should treat her better, Vincent. I am, by keeping her away from me. Even dear mother agrees." Edward sighed. "I heard Allie was feeling unwell. If you could drop by, I would appreciate it. You have appreciated me enough, Father. I'll see you at dinner." When he reached the mansion, Vincent ordered blood tea and headed for the stairs. "Allie, is that you?" he whispered, worried, as he headed to the piano room. Near the piano room, a small shriek split the air. Vincent kicked the door open. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" Allie was pinned to the floor by the vampire governess, face smeared with tears and blood. The governess turned in shock. Vincent caught her by the neck and drove her head into the ground, eyes glowing red. A light crack rang out. Allie's fangs fell from the governess's hands. The little girl scrambled away until her back touched the wall. Slow laughter filled the room. The governess leered up at him. An eye for an eye. How does it feel that the little girl has no fangs anymore? Why did you do it? Vincent seethed. Wouldn't you want to know? Now your family will know what it means to look down on people just because you think you can. His fingernails dug into the woman's neck before severing her head from her body. He wiped his hand with his handkerchief, then crouched before Allie and lifted her chin. Her fangs had been forcefully pulled out, the rim of her eyes red and swollen. She quickly wrapped her small arms around him. "That is enough tears for this year. Save some for the next. I never knew a sister of mine who was a crybaby." Allie pulled away, trying hard not to cry. "A Moriarty doesn't cry. They make others cry, unless you've decided not to be one. Let us get you cleaned up." When they were about to leave, Theo entered, eyes wide. Master Vincent, what happened here?" "Arrogance," replied Vincent, ordering the body buried for inspection. Miss Allie hid directly behind him, a first. When he stepped out, she followed like a shadow. Back in the carriage, Eve stared at Vincent. Why did she do it? His eyes lightly glowed. "What do you think? An action committed by someone in the family cost Allie her fangs. My dearest mother threw a maid out of the mansion for failing to follow orders. The woman fell ill and died. Her children, along with others, decided to humiliate the family. The goal was fulfilled. It explained more than Eve had words for. The silence around Allie. How she barely spoke. The way Annalise kept her hidden. The way Allie flinched whenever anyone looked too long at her mouth. "It was never Miss Allie's fault," whispered Eve. "This is why Lady Annalise wants Allie hidden away. She was hysterical when she found out, but it was already done." A faint, sadistic smile crossed his lips. Her eyes met Vincent's. No, this person was not a sheep. While many were wolves in sheep's clothing, this one wore no disguise at all. When the carriage reached Meadow, Eve stepped down and bowed. Vincent watched her golden blonde hair sway toward the gate, his eyes narrowing subtly. "Start the carriage, Briggs." At home, Eve told Aunt Aubrey everything. Poor girl, no wonder she doesn't speak much. Fangless vampires are reduced to mere humans. "I don't understand how anyone could hurt a small girl like Allie," Eve said quietly. Eugene appeared with tea and saw her shoes. "These are really beautiful, Miss Eve. Did it fit?" They didn't. But Mr. Moriarty adjusted the insole. "What a kind man. I guess he isn't too bad," she murmured of Vincent. Her feet always caused trouble with new shoes. They appeared just like a human's, yet left her with unusual blisters. In his study, Vincent sat with 5 books on the table. Theo reported household business, then heard his master ask, "How good is your knowledge of the vampire body?" "Average, sire." "Do I need to count bones?" "Then you must be familiar with the vampire's feet. The vampires and werewolves' base skeletons are the same, while both have obvious outward differences. Why do you ponder it, sire?" Vincent closed his book. Just a little case I was able to get my hands on. He had never thought about anyone's feet until he had held Eve's, and something about them troubled him. The next morning, Eve borrowed Aunt Aubrey's pocket watch while hers was being repaired. She'd gotten late and missed her carriage. Coincidentally, Noah Sullivan was waiting at the end of the street. He offered to drop her at Skellington. Status can be easily discarded if the person is important. After all, we are not strangers now, but friends. When Noah's carriage stopped at the Moriarty mansion, Edward, Lady Annalise, and Marceline, waiting outside, all took notice. Edward grinned. "Isn't that wonderful, honey? Now you don't have to worry about people talking about Vincent picking up a governess from a lower class." Annalise narrowed her eyes at the 4-horse carriage that had come to drop her. "The people of Meadow cannot afford more than 2 horses, trying to behave as if they are better than us," and stepped inside. In his departing carriage, Noah stared at his own reflection. Who would have thought that out of all the families, she was working for the pure-blooded vampire family? Vincent caught Eve before she could leave that day, and told her to keep a low profile at the ball. That night, Eve lay awake. Her kind didn't live long enough to see their hair turn gray, a creature that humans sold, vampires drank from, and werewolves ate. On the way home, she had passed a bride beside her new husband. The smile on Eve's lips died quickly. She would never have a marriage like that, she thought. The following day, Mr. Humphrey appeared before the local carriage and invited her to the Moriarty ball. Eve was surprised Humphrey received the invitation, but politely refused him twice and walked on. Far away, in the forest of West Walls near the sea, 2 men carried a yellow-tailed mermaid in a net, her mouth cloth-gagged. One of the men, Wyatt, spoke up. "The little bitch sure likes to bite. You sure this one isn't a siren?" "Sirens are different and harder to catch. This one swam right into the trap," said the other one. Before loading her into the carriage, Wyatt leaned toward her. "It's a shame I won't be able to enjoy you better, but others will today. They were delivering her to their middleman, Mr. Walker. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Theo relayed Lady Annalise's order for Eve to end her lessons early and prepare for the ball. "Do not worry, you will play the song better than anyone I have known," Eve told Allie before leaving. In the corridors, servants draped white lilies and peonies under the stout decorator, Mr. Jenkins, while Marceline watched. The middleman, Clayton Walker, arrived with 4 men and a large wooden box. Marceline paid him from a bag of coins and promised the rest later. The night of the ball arrived. Aunt Aubrey pinned Eve's golden blonde hair, the piece at the back tied with a ribbon, painted her lips a light cherry, and clasped a small topaz pendant at her neck. Eve slipped into the pastel blue gown, which under candlelight revealed itself as bluish-gray with subtle cream 4-petal flowers. Eugene brought Aunt Aubrey's jewelry box, his eyes turning dewy. Eve wore the shoes from Hollow Valley, murmured, "What have I done?" at her reflection, and let Aunt Aubrey hold her hand. "Have a good time and try to blend in." Eugene drove the carriage to Skellington. Eve scolded him for announcing her as Lady Eve. He smiled. "I am just playing the part of your personal coachman. Stay safe. Most of the wealthy family's coachmen are not humans. Sit inside, and if trouble brews, we'll head home." Inside, carved ceilings she had never noticed at work glowed with lanterns and tall candles. The place smelled sweet. Her face brightened the moment she found Noah. "You look more beautiful than usual today, Genevieve," Noah said, kissing the back of her hand. "I had second thoughts about attending, but somewhere I hoped I would see you here." As Eve and Noah walked together, they garnered several stares from the people on their way. Eve was happy that she didn't have to be alone now. Suddenly, she heard Vincenti's voice. "Duke Sullivan, how kind of you to attend the ball by taking time off from your busy schedule." Vincent walked toward them with a bright smile on his lips. Eve offered a small bow. "Mr. Moriarty," the Duke greeted before the 2 men exchanged a handshake. "Thank you for inviting me. I couldn't refuse, especially when it came directly from you. I see that you have already met with our capable governess," he said, then turned to look at Eve, who began to worry about what he was going to say. "Yes, Genevieve and I have met long before she came to work in your mansion." Noah smiled, looking at Eve, and she smiled back at him. The Duke then said, "Unusual, isn't it? To have a human for a governess in your mansion?" Vincent's lips twisted before his dark red eyes stared at Eve. Not as unusual as for a Duke to be friends with someone from a background he wouldn't mingle," replied Vincent, and he added, "Not that it is wrong. It is just a little uncommon. Uncommon is what we perceive it to be, Mr. Moriarty." "You mustn't be familiar with it," Noah responded to Vincent's words. "You would be surprised to know how familiar I am with the concept that you speak of," Vincent said, his eyes still playful. He asked, "Are you enjoying the position of Duke? The last I heard, you weren't interested in it. What changed?" This caught Eve's attention, and she turned to look at Noah, who stared at Vincent with his black eyes. The Duke answered with a serious face, "I came to realize that there are people who need to be protected, and I would be able to do that by being Duke. With position comes power. If there's anyone who knows it, it should be you." And a kind smile appeared on his lips. He said, "I heard the council wants you to join them." Vincent continued smiling. "The old people from the council always like to steal others' time, and I like to keep mine to myself. Not to mention, I lack the same incentive or purpose as others do." Seeing the 2 men's conversation shift to discussing their work, Eve let out a subtle sigh of relief, which was until she heard Vincent say to her, "Miss Barlow, I thought you would see where Allie is and assist her. Did your attention get directed to something else?" His eyes held mischief in them, while Noah looked like he didn't catch the meaning behind Vincent's words. Eve left immediately. A maid in the West Wing told Eve she had been searching for Allie for over half an hour. They split up. Eve moved through corridor after corridor until she found Allie beside a balcony pillar, alone and staring up at the stars. "What are you doing here sitting alone when there are people waiting to see you?" Allie shook her head. "I can't. People will laugh at me." Then, quietly, "Sister Marceline is prettier. No one will see me." Eve sat beside her. "I think you are the prettiest girl in this mansion right now. What happened wasn't your fault, Miss Allie. It doesn't matter if you don't play the way people expect. Forget those watching. Believe that you are the mistress of the skill. Tonight might be the night people look at you differently." Allie put her arms around Eve's waist. "Thank you," she whispered. When Theo found them, Eve said, "Miss Allie wanted to use the bathroom, and it got a little late." In the ballroom, as Eve stood in a corner waiting for Allie to play, Mr. Humphrey, who had stolen his invitation from a client, met Eve and started chatting, loudly implying he and Eve had arranged to meet. When he reached for her hand to kiss it, Eve faked a sneeze. Her hand slipped clean from the glove, leaving Humphrey holding it. Vincent appeared, towering over him. "Who are you?" asked Humphrey rudely. "The ground upon which you stand belongs to me. Human." Terrified of getting CVOD over his stolen invitation, Humphrey claimed to be Eve's personal servant. Vincent sent him to the servant corner, and Humphrey reluctantly went and stood there. Vincent then took Eve's glass and offered his hand. "Milady, what are you doing? Leading you to the dance floor." He grabbed her hand and pulled her to the center of the room. The people who weren't dancing and were nearby continued to look at the couple who stood out from the rest of the group on the dance floor. Many of them wondered who the woman was with whom Vincent Moriarty had bothered to dance. "What a lovely gown she is wearing," murmured one of the women, who was fanning her face with the wooden fan in her hand. "With a gown like that? I thought it was usually Lady Annalise or Lady Marceline, but it seems like we have another woman with spectacular taste." Another vampiress whispered, "If you ask me, I think it is the best gown in the entire ball. Don't you think so?" "Maybe you're right. I have never seen her before. Who is she?" "I don't know, but for Vincent to dance with her, she must be from an esteemed family." From across the ballroom, Marceline watched as guests praised the governess's gown above her own. Her grip on her glass tightened until it shattered, shards piercing her skin. A man beside her offered a handkerchief. "Thank you, Mr. Leverer." Marceline discreetly picked one shard of glass, hiding it in her dress. On the dance floor, when Eve's foot wobbled, Vincent caught her firmly. "Don't hide. Standing in the corner, moving like a tiny cockroach. Don't do that. You shouldn't dim your light to let others burn, because they won't just burn. They will turn you to ash. Would you like to know something? I'm not sure I want to. Do you know how you look tonight?" She braced herself. "You look like a delicious drink." As the song ended, he whispered near her ear, "Looks like someone is unhappy that you are dancing with me." Eve looked. Noah was watching them, eyebrows furrowed. Lady Annalise, watching from across the room, clenched her hands. "Did you see him dancing with that lowly human?" Edward patted her arm. "No one knows she's our governess. Let us brush it away." Earlier, Eve had found Rosetta Hook being used as an errand runner by vampiresses who mocked her behind her back. When one interrupted Rosetta mid-sentence again, Eve said coolly, "I don't know if you have heard it before, but it is rude to interrupt someone when they speak, not to mention badmouth behind a person's back." The vampiresses left. "Nobody ever wants to be friends with me. I don't know what I am doing wrong," Eve replied. "Sometimes we need to allow others to speak. It lets others connect with you rather than just listen to you." Later, Eve watched with a quiet ache as Noah and Marceline danced two songs together, while Rosetta fled the moment Vincent walked past. Edward clinked his glass for silence and called Allie forward for Lady Annalise's birthday. Annalise whispered that she didn't think the girl was ready. She cannot hide in her room forever. Let us hope Vincent appointed the right governess. Allie sat at the pianoforte, feet trembling beneath the bench, noticed by Vincent, and by Eve, who had moved to the other side so Allie could see her. A shrill keystroke jolted the room. "That's one way to get rid of the nerves," Vincent murmured. Then Allie steadied and played richly and beautifully for over 3 minutes. Vincent started the applause. Annalise embraced her daughter. "What a wonderful piece as a birthday gift. I couldn't expect anything less from my daughter." Allie hugged her back, having craved that embrace for a long time. Noah found Eve. "Soon you will be a governess in high demand. The little one's effort should not go unnoticed. Would you like to dance with me, Genevieve?" On the floor, Noah admitted Marceline had insisted on dancing with him. "You are a dear person to me. I would be upset if something were to happen to you. Not every employer takes his employee to the dance floor. Be careful." As the music swelled, they drifted close. Noah leaned toward Eve and her heart stuttered. Then he pulled back. "I need to go visit the powder room," Eve said quickly. In the powder room, Eve stood before the mirror and muttered, "I want to bury myself. The next time you see him, act normal. Don't make an even bigger fool over yourself." Marceline entered with a sweet smile. "We appear to be around the same age, and my shoes fit you perfectly." It would only be right that we appear as sisters. She asked what Eve knew of Noah. Eve described him as humble and kind. That's the exact kind of man I was looking for. Secretly, we have been stealing gazes from afar. Then Marceline knelt to fix a crinkle in Eve's hem, and while speaking, placed the broken glass shard, sharpened edge facing up, on the floor near Eve's feet. "Why don't you turn around so I can check your gown?" Eve turned. Her foot came down directly on the glass. Marceline stood and smiled. "It's all fixed and good." Back in the ballroom, Eve felt only a dull poke she put down to her usual foot trouble. A polite man stepped forward. "I am Henry, the Earl's son. May I have a dance with you?" On the floor, she lost her balance twice. Henry supported her each time. "I must be tired from dancing before. If you don't mind, I'd like to rest my feet." He kissed her hand in parting. "May I know your name?" "Jen Barlow." She walked to a corner to quietly check her shoe. She never got the chance. Charles, Lady Annalise's drunk younger brother, appeared at her side. A servant who failed to refill his glass in time was slapped by him in front of nearby guests, which resulted in him dropping the wine bottle to the floor, a shard of glass skidding near Eve's feet. Charles struck again. He ordered the servant to lick the wine from the floor. The servant lowered himself, hands shaking. "Stop," Eve said. Charles glared. "It seems like you want to take the servant's place." Eve placed her hand on his arm and smiled. Aunt Aubrey had once taught her that sometimes one had to throw mud in someone's eyes, and sometimes praise the person no matter what an idiot they were. "I think there are far more severe punishments for this servant, Mr. Gallagher. How about later? After all, you never dropped the glass." "He did." "Why wouldn't I think of you first?" Flattered and drunk, Charles ordered the servant outside to clean up instead. The servant offered Eve a quick look of thanks when Charles's back was turned. An elderly man named Holden stepped forward. Charles introduced Eve as my little niece's governess, and added that every woman from Meadow was fit only to warm a bed. "Women are far more capable than that, Mr. Gallagher. A woman turns into a mother who gives birth and provides nourishment and love. She is the giver of life. I think you forget that the man works outside and provides everything to his family. What is the point of bringing raw rice if it isn't going to be cooked?" My aunt was a governess, and her support allowed me to choose what I wanted to become. Charles snorted. "The next you will tell me they want to join the High Council," and wandered off for more wine. Holden lingered. "Forgive me, but I thought you resembled someone I knew from many years ago. A beautiful woman. When she walked, many heads turned. When I saw you dancing with Edward's son, I thought of her." He then laughed to himself. "A very elegant and poised woman for being a..." He tried to find a better word, and Eve helped him person that provided accompaniment? Right, to accompany. She had dark hair, black eyes that shined. I am a married man, so I never thought to talk to her. You know how it is in our society, to know and exchange words with people who are even lower than the lower class. His last words were a whisper to Eve. Eve's throat went dry. Though plenty of women had dark hair and black eyes, she knew only one woman closely with that description. But her mother was a maid. Do you know what her name was? Sadly, with time, I seem to have forgotten. But if I remember, I will tell you. He excused himself. Eve stood very still. Did her mother accompany men of higher society? No, that wasn't possible, thought Eve to herself. The older man must have spoken about someone else. Meanwhile, in the back garden, Rosetta sat with 7 empty wine glasses beside her, and an 8th in hand. Life is so sad, she told no one. After the 8th glass, she headed inside, only to walk directly into Vincent's eye line. She turned and fled. I am the daughter of the Marquis. I am not scared of anyone, she declared, not knowing Vincent was least bothered. Outside the gates, Humphrey had decided to wait for Eve. When he overheard Marquis's daughter and approached the intoxicated young woman, I want a drink. Go get me one now, Rosetta ordered. Humphrey dashed inside, stole a glass while avoiding Vincent's gaze, and returned, to find her gone. Humphrey stood with the glass, staring at nothing. Rosetta wandered the street until she gave up, and leaned against the nearest carriage. The door opened. Eugene, startled from his nap. Twins sure look similar like a mirror, she told him. He smelled alcohol. She burst into tears. You're too kind, and I'm lost. She threw up against a nearby tree. He patted her back and produced his water bottle. She drank every last drop. "I finished it," she said without thanks. "You must be shocked to see a woman of my status throwing up in the street." "I ignore such unimportant things, milady. Nobody pays attention to me. You seem like a good person." "I am? Very much so," she answered with great solemnity. "I know." Inside, the music stopped. Marceline stepped forward and waited until every head turned. "Mother Annalise has been the most beloved person to my siblings and me. Thanks to her, the emptiness I experienced many years ago was filled. I wouldn't be who I am if not for her and my father." Annalise's chin tipped up with pride. "I couldn't ask for a better daughter." Eve thought of her own birthday traditions. A hairpin for Aunt Aubrey, socks for Eugene, her mother's special porridge with meat, when she shifted her weight and felt a sharp prick beneath her soul. Worse than a needle. Something glinted in the candlelight when she lifted her hem. Glass from when Charles had dropped the wine. At Mr. Walker's instruction, the guests moved aside. Eve had no choice but to follow, each step driving the glass deeper. She tried removing the shoe, saw blood, slipped it back on with her teeth pressed together, and breathed. She would wait for her moment. The wooden box was brought in and its sides removed. Inside a glass case, half submerged in water, was the yellow-tailed mermaid, frightened, pressing herself against the glass. "Oh my," Lady Annalise exclaimed. "Where did you find her?" Marceline explained the months of effort and the lump sum of gold. "I asked for a vial of the mermaid blood, but you brought a whole mermaid," Annalise laughed, kissing Marceline's cheek. Annalise ordered the mermaid brought from the case. Servants placed her on a table and held her still. A werewolf with golden eyes stepped forward. "She looks young and tender. You wouldn't mind if I had a scale or two?" Annalise agreed since he was royalty. He waved off the offered knife, slid his hand along the mermaid's tail, and harshly pushed one of her scales. She screamed, the sound echoing off every wall, then plucked the second and tasted both. Absolutely delicious. Other werewolves offered jewels and land in return for a bite of the mermaid. Marceline raised her hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to hold your horses." A servant approached with a knife. The mermaid shook her head frantically, eyes welling. Nearby, Allie watched in awe. On the far side, Vincent spoke quietly to Theo. "It doesn't look like she did a very good job finding a quality mermaid. No? First come the tears, then come the pearls. But this mermaid's pearls aren't of high quality." "You will see soon," remarked Vincent, as a few pearls bounced on the table and fell to the floor. Eve had already noticed blood seeping from her shoe, and dropped her handkerchief over a drop on the floor. A passing guest returned it without reacting. She knew that mermaid blood smelled no different from a human's. Taste was the only difference. Now, watching her own kind pressed against the glass in terror, Eve's face was pale. She began edging toward the doors. Nearby, a woman with diamond earrings said she could smell the mermaid's blood from where she stood. The man beside her. A few mermaids, mermen, and sirens had once come to live on these lands before some returned to the sea and some were caught. Who knows if a few more are left and have been hiding? A shiver ran down Eve's spine. She looked across the room and saw Vincent, but immediately looked away. He felt someone's gaze and turned. She was nearly at the doors when she collided with someone. "What are you doing, painting the floor red?" Vincent said quietly, leaning close so only she could hear. Eve's eyes went wide. Goosebumps rose on her skin. He stepped beside her, tall and steady. Her lips trembled. "Now is the time to leave, Miss Barlow. Unless you plan to die, then you will owe me your life." He wrapped his fingers around her wrist. "Can you walk? Let's hope you can." As he pulled her toward the double doors, Marceline's eyes found them and narrowed. When Vincent's lips quirked upward at her, Marceline's eyes narrowed further. He turned the knob and stepped out with Eve, the doors closing behind them. Moments later, a servant in the ballroom accidentally dropped a tray of wine glasses. The wine spread across the marble, washing over the trail of Eve's blood. Guests scolded the servant. "Please pardon us for the mess," said Alfie, the mansion's second butler, appearing quickly and signaling 2 more servants to clean the floor. Outside, Eve could dimly hear the mermaid's cries through the closed doors. She turned to Vincent and stammered with a quick bow, "I should go home." Didn't I tell you that you owe me your life, Miss Barlow? And what makes you think you are safe once you step out of here? With a foot that is bleeding and the scent of blood so rich and potent in the air, do you think you will be spared the moment you step outside this mansion? Your foot needs to be fixed before you go anywhere. Eve's heart squeezed, thinking of the mermaid she was leaving behind. I cannot walk anymore, she said, placing her hand over his to stop him. She had learned to hold her tears back since she was little, but she was very close to that edge now. I thought you would be fine walking back to your carriage. No? Vincent raised his eyebrows. Then without another word, he bent near her, hooked one hand under her legs, and used the other to support her back. Eve's hand wound quickly around his neck. Her scared eyes looked up at him. It's good that you didn't try to protest, he said, because I would have dropped you and you would have to worry about your back apart from your foot. He turned to the guards at a distance. If someone asks for me, tell them I have retired for the night. The guards bowed. Yes, sir. Eve frowned up at him. Your family is going to wonder why, Master Vincent. Don't fret. It isn't anything new. They would be surprised I even stayed this long. He added, and if they ask about Miss Barlow, tell them she went home. Then Vincent Moriarty started to walk, carrying Eve in his arms through the quiet of the hallway.
Install the Pocket FM app now within 1 minute to listen to the first 10 episodes for free. Download now before the offer disappears.